Most people want a better life, but they spend their energy trying to control the wrong things. They try to control outcomes, people, circumstances, and timing. And when those things resist, as they always do, they feel powerless, frustrated, and exhausted. But transformation does not begin by controlling the world around you. It begins by mastering what happens within you. Because the moment you gain control over what is inside, the outside starts to realign. The first thing you must learn to control is your thoughts. Every action you take is born in a thought. Long before success or failure shows up in your life, it already existed as a belief in your mind. If your inner dialogue is filled with fear, scarcity, and self-doubt, your life will unconsciously move in that direction. Not because life is cruel, but because the mind follows what it rehearses. When you choose thoughts rooted in truth, gratitude, and purpose, your nervous system calms, your focus sharpens, and your decisions improve. What you repeatedly think, you eventually become. The second thing is your words. Words are not harmless. They shape your identity and program your future. The way you speak to yourself when no one is listening matters more than any motivational quote you hear. When your words are aligned with intention, humility, and faith, they create clarity. When your words are reactive, negative, or careless, they quietly erode your confidence. Speak with responsibility. Speak with meaning. Speak as if your life is listening, because it is. The third thing to control is your emotions. Emotions are powerful signals, but they were never meant to be your leaders. When emotions are unregulated, they hijack reason and distort reality. Wisdom is not the absence of emotion. It is the ability to feel deeply without losing direction. Pause before reacting. Breathe before responding. Emotional control is not suppression. It is understanding. And when you understand what you feel, you regain the power to choose how you act. Fourth thing is your habits. Habits are invisible architects of your future. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your daily patterns. Small disciplines practiced consistently shape character, health, faith, and fulfillment. What you do every day either strengthens your purpose or weakens it. Transformation is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, intentional, and faithful in the small things. When these four are aligned, thoughts, words, emotions, and habits, something remarkable happens. Life feels lighter, decisions feel clearer. You stop chasing validation and start living with direction. Control becomes not about force, but about stewardship. You are no longer reacting to life, you are responding with intention. And here is the deeper truth. Self-control is not restriction, it is freedom. It frees you from chaos, from regret, from living at the mercy of impulses. When control is guided by values, wisdom, and a higher purpose, your life begins to reflect order, peace, and meaning. You don't need to change everything today. You only need to take responsibility for these four. Master them, and you won't just improve your life, you will transform it from the inside out. Most people underestimate the power of their thoughts, yet thoughts are the silent architects of every life. Long before a decision is made, long before an action is taken, a thought has already laid the foundation. What you repeatedly think becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar starts to feel true, even when it is not. This is why controlling your thoughts is not about positive thinking or denying reality. It is about choosing which inner narratives deserve your attention and which ones must be questioned. Your mind is constantly interpreting the world. It assigns meaning to events, people, and even silence. Two individuals can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different outcomes, not because the situation changed, but because their thoughts did. One sees a setback as proof of failure, the other as feedback for growth. The difference is not intelligence or talent, but mental discipline. When thoughts are left unchecked, they default to fear, negativity, and survival. The brain is wired to protect, not to inspire. That is why intentional control is essential. Uncontrolled thoughts quietly shape your direction. If you constantly tell yourself that you are not ready, not enough, or too late, your behavior will align with that belief. You will hesitate, overthink, and avoid opportunities. Over time, life appears to confirm what you already believed, creating a loop that feels like fate but is actually conditioning. Controlling your thoughts breaks this cycle. It creates space between what happens to you and how you interpret it. In that space, wisdom begins. Thought control starts with awareness. You cannot change what you do not notice. Many people live on mental autopilot, replaying old memories, past wounds, and imagined futures that never arrive. Their energy is drained not by reality, but by the stories they tell themselves about reality. When you observe your thoughts without immediately believing them, you regain authority over your inner world. A thought is not a command, it is a suggestion, and not every suggestion deserves agreement. There is also a physiological dimension to thought control. Repeated negative thinking activates stress responses in the body, increasing anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional reactivity. Calm. Purposeful thoughts send signals of safety to the nervous system. This is why wisdom traditions have always emphasized reflection, prayer, and stillness. When the mind slows down, clarity rises. When the mind is centered on truth rather than fear, decisions become cleaner and more aligned with purpose. Controlling your thoughts does not mean eliminating doubt or pain. It means choosing where you dwell. You can acknowledge fear without letting it define you. You can feel uncertainty without surrendering to it. The mind follows what it focuses on. When you repeatedly focus on what is meaningful, what is possible, and what is within your control, your confidence grows naturally. Not the loud kind, but the grounded kind that does not need validation. Thoughts also influence identity. Over time, repeated thinking becomes belief, and belief becomes self-image. If you consistently think of yourself as someone capable of learning, growing, and contributing, you will act in alignment with that identity. If your thoughts define you as broken or limited, actions will shrink accordingly. Identity is not discovered. It is built through the thoughts you allow to live rent-free in your mind. Mastering your thoughts is an act of responsibility. It is choosing not to be ruled by impulses, past experiences, or external noise. When your thoughts are aligned with values, purpose, and truth, your direction becomes clear. You may not control everything that happens in life, but when you control your thoughts, you control how life shapes you. Words are not simply sounds or expressions. They are instruments of creation. Every word you speak carries direction, intention, and meaning. Long before the world responds to you, your words have already shaped how you see yourself and how others experience you. This is why controlling your words is not about speaking less, but about speaking with awareness. Language is the bridge between thought and reality. And when that bridge is weak or careless, confusion follows. The way you speak to yourself is the most influential conversation you will ever have. Internal dialogue quietly sets boundaries on what you believe is possible. When your inner language is harsh, dismissive, or defeatist, it creates emotional resistance and mental fatigue. You begin to doubt your capacity even before you try. But when your self-talk is grounded in honesty and compassion, it builds resilience. It does not ignore challenges, it reframes them. Words spoken inwardly can either heal or harm, encourage or imprison. Spoken words also shape identity. Repeated phrases become labels, and labels turn into beliefs. When you constantly say, "I'm bad at this, I always fail," or "this is just who I am," you are not describing reality, you are reinforcing it. Over time, the brain accepts repetition as truth. This is why intentional language matters. Speaking with purpose is an act of leadership over your own life. You begin to align who you are becoming with what you declare. Your words influence relationships in the same way they influence identity. A single sentence can strengthen trust or quietly damage it. Tone, timing, and intention all matter. Words spoken in frustration may feel honest in the moment, but they often leave wounds that logic cannot heal. Wise communication does not aim to win arguments, it aims to preserve connection. When words are chosen with empathy and respect, they create psychological safety, allowing others to listen rather than defend. There is also power in restraint. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Silence, when guided by wisdom, can protect peace and prevent unnecessary conflict. Many regrets are not born from action, but from words spoken too quickly and without reflection. Controlling your words means pausing long enough to ask whether what you are about to say is true, necessary, and constructive. This pause is not weakness, it is strength. Words also shape the atmosphere around you. Environments are built not only by actions, but by language. A workplace, a home, or a friendship reflects the dominant tone of the words exchanged within it. Language filled with gratitude, encouragement, and clarity elevates energy. Language filled with criticism, sarcasm, and blame drains it. When you control your words, you become a source of calm rather than chaos. There is a deeper, almost sacred responsibility in speech. Words carry intention beyond logic. They plant seeds in the minds and hearts of others. A kind word can restore hope. A careless word can echo for years. This is why wisdom traditions emphasize speaking with integrity. When words align with values, they carry authority. When they do not, they lose credibility. Controlling your words does not mean pretending or performing. It means aligning speech with truth, humility, and purpose. It means understanding that every sentence is a reflection of inner order or inner conflict. When your words are intentional, they reinforce clarity. They strengthen identity, deepen relationships, and create alignment between who you are and how you live. Emotions are powerful messengers, but they were never meant to be the decision makers of your life. They rise quickly, often without permission, and they demand immediate attention. When left unchecked, emotions can distort perception, cloud judgment, and push you into reactions that do not reflect who you truly are. Controlling your emotions is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about learning to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. Every emotion carries information. Fear signals perceived danger. Anger points to violated boundaries. Sadness reveals loss, and joy highlights meaning. The problem begins when emotions are mistaken for commands instead of signals. When fear decides for you, you avoid growth. When anger leads, you damage trust. When sadness defines you, hope feels unreachable. Emotional control starts with recognizing that emotions are temporary states, not permanent truths. The nervous system plays a central role in emotional regulation. When the body perceives threat, real or imagined, it activates survival responses. In this state, logic weakens and instinct dominates. This is why emotionally charged moments often lead to regret. Learning to calm the body through breath, stillness, and awareness creates space between emotion and action. In that space, choice returns. You are no longer a prisoner of what you feel. Many people fear their emotions because they were never taught how to process them. Instead, emotions were suppressed, judged, or ignored. Suppression, however, does not eliminate emotion, it stores it. Unprocessed emotions resurface as anxiety, irritability, or exhaustion. True emotional control comes from understanding and naming what you feel without shame. When an emotion is acknowledged, it loses its power to dominate. Emotional maturity is revealed in moments of pressure. Anyone can remain calm when life is smooth. Wisdom shows itself when expectations are broken, when plans fail, or when words hurt. In these moments, the ability to pause is transformative. A pause allows the emotional wave to pass without causing damage. It allows you to choose dignity over dominance, understanding over accusation. Controlling emotions also protects relationships. Many connections are not destroyed by events, but by emotional reactions to those events. Harsh words spoken in anger, silence fueled by pride, our impulsive decisions, driven by fear, leave scars that logic cannot erase. When emotions are regulated, communication becomes clearer and more compassionate. You begin to listen instead of react, to understand instead of defend. There is also a moral dimension to emotional control. When emotions rule unchecked, values are compromised. Integrity weakens under pressure when feelings dictate behavior. But when emotions are guided by principles, strength emerges. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can feel fear without becoming dishonest. You can feel sadness without losing hope. This alignment between emotion and values creates inner peace. Self-control over emotions is not achieved overnight. It is built through repeated practice. Each time you choose to breathe instead of explode, reflect instead of react, and respond instead of retreat, you strengthen emotional resilience. Over time, what once triggered chaos begins to trigger clarity. Emotions are part of being human, but mastery over them is part of becoming wise. When you control your emotions, you reclaim your ability to act intentionally. Life does not become easier, but you become steadier. And steadiness is what allows purpose, peace, and meaning to take root. Habits are the quiet forces shaping your life long before you notice the results. They work in the background, forming patterns that eventually feel like personality or fate. Most people overestimate the power of sudden decisions and underestimate the influence of what they repeatedly do. Yet life is rarely changed by one dramatic moment. It is shaped by small actions practiced consistently, often without emotion or excitement. Every habit begins as a choice, but over time the choice disappears and the behavior remains. What you do daily no longer requires motivation. It requires alignment. This is why habits are so powerful. They bypass willpower and operate automatically. If your habits are aligned with purpose, they carry you forward even on difficult days. If they are misaligned, they quietly pull you away from the life you want, even when your intentions are good. Habits also shape identity. You do not rise to a new identity by declaring it. You step into it by behaving like it. Repeated actions send signals to the brain about who you are. When you consistently show up, practice discipline, and keep commitments, your self-trust grows. When habits are broken repeatedly, self-doubt increases. Over time, habits either reinforce confidence or weaken it. Identity is not built through words, but through repetition. There is a neurological dimension to habits as well. The brain is designed to conserve energy, so it favors patterns that require less effort. Once a behavior becomes familiar, it feels comfortable, even if it is harmful. This is why breaking negative habits feels uncomfortable, not because change is wrong, but because the brain resists uncertainty. Understanding this removes shame. Struggle does not mean allure. It means rewiring. Controlling habits requires intention, not perfection. Many people fail because they aim for radical change instead of sustainable consistency. Small habits practiced daily have more power than intense efforts practiced occasionally. A few minutes of reflection, a short moment of gratitude, or a simple act of discipline repeated over time reshapes character. Transformation happens gradually, but its effects are lasting. Habits also influence emotional and mental stability. Regular routines provide structure to the nervous system. Sleep, movement, silence, and focused work regulate energy and attention. When habits are chaotic, emotions follow. When habits are grounded, the mind feels safer. This stability creates clarity, allowing you to respond to life instead of constantly reacting to it. There is also a spiritual dimension to habits. What you practice consistently becomes what you honor. Daily actions reflect priorities more honestly than words. When habits align with values such as integrity, service, and reflection, life gains meaning. Discipline becomes devotion, not punishment. Even mundane routines take on purpose when they are aligned with something greater than comfort. Negative habits rarely begin as self-destruction. They begin as coping mechanisms. Over time, what once provided relief becomes limitation. Controlling habits requires compassion towards yourself and courage to choose differently. Awareness is the first step. The second replacement. Habits are not erased, they are replaced. A harmful pattern loses power when a healthier one takes its place. Mastery over habits is mastery over direction. You may not feel the impact immediately, but consistency never lies. Day by day, habits shape health, relationships, faith, and fulfillment. When you take responsibility for what you practice, you take responsibility for who you are becoming. Inner peace does not arrive by accident. It is not the result of a perfect life, favorable circumstances, or the absence of problems. Inner peace is built, slowly and intentionally, through self-control. Without self-control, the mind is constantly pulled in different directions by impulses, emotions, opinions, and expectations. With self-control, the inner world gains structure, and where there is structure, peace can exist. Self-control is often misunderstood as rigidity or suppression, but in truth it is clarity in action. It is the ability to choose what aligns with your values even when temptation, pressure, or emotion pushes you elsewhere. When you lack self-control, life feels noisy. Thoughts compete, emotions clash, and decisions are reactive. This internal chaos eventually manifests as stress, anxiety, and restlessness. Peace becomes impossible, not because life is hard, but because the inner world is undisciplined. Leadership, in any form, begins internally. Before you can lead others, you must lead yourself. Self-control is the skill that allows this. LPS. You delay gratification, tolerate discomfort, and remain consistent. These are not just traits of discipline, they are traits of stability. When your actions are not dictated by mood, you become predictable in the best way, reliable, grounded, and trustworthy. This consistency creates calm, both within you and around you. The absence of self-control often leads to regret. Words spoken too quickly, decisions made impulsively, habits formed without intention. Each one leaves a residue. Over time, these unresolved moments weigh on the conscience. Inner peace fades when the mind is occupied with what should not have been done or said. Self-control protects you from this inner conflict. It aligns action with intention, reducing the gap between who you are and how you live. There is also a physiological aspect to self-control. When impulses constantly override reason, the nervous system remains in a heightened state of alert. This creates exhaustion and emotional volatility. Self-control calms the system by creating predictability. When the brain trusts that you will act with intention rather than impulse, it relaxes. This calm state is fertile ground for reflection, creativity, and empathy. Self-control also allows boundaries to exist. Without it, boundaries are either rigid or non-existent. With it, boundaries are clear and respectful. You can say no without guilt and yes without resentment. This balance preserves energy and protects emotional health. Inner peace is sustained, not by pleasing everyone, but by honoring what truly matters. There is wisdom in restraint. Not every desire needs to be fulfilled, and not every opportunity needs to be taken. Self-control gives you the ability to pause and evaluate. It creates distance between stimulus and response, allowing discernment to guide action. In that pause, peace grows. You are no longer being dragged by circumstances. You are choosing your direction. Self-control is not about denying joy. It is about choosing deeper joy over momentary relief. Impulses promise comfort, but often deliver regret. Discipline may feel uncomfortable at first, but it produces confidence and serenity. When you trust yourself to act wisely, anxiety decreases. You stop fearing your own reactions. And that trust is the foundation of inner peace. Ultimately, self-control is an act of respect toward yourself. It acknowledges that your future deserves protection from your present impulses. When you cultivate self-control, you create a stable inner environment where peace is not occasional, but sustainable. Discipline on its own can feel heavy, mechanical, and exhausting. Purpose on its own can feel inspiring, but fragile. When discipline and purpose are separated, effort becomes forced and motivation fades. But when discipline is aligned with purpose, something powerful happens. Consistency gains meaning, and effort gains direction. This alignment is what transforms temporary change into lasting transformation. Many people struggle with discipline because they treat it as punishment rather than alignment. They try to force behaviors without understanding why those behaviors matter. The mind resists actions that feel empty or imposed. Purpose gives discipline context. It answers the deeper question of why the effort is necessary. When actions are connected to meaning, resistance softens. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are cooperating with your future. Purpose acts as an internal compass. It does not eliminate difficulty, but it clarifies direction. Discipline then becomes the vehicle that moves you forward even when motivation is absent. Motivation is emotional and inconsistent. Discipline is deliberate and stable. When discipline is anchored to purpose, it no longer depends on mood. You act not because you feel like it, but because you understand what is at stake. There is also a neurological truth behind this alignment. The brain is more willing to endure discomfort when it perceives meaning. Effort without meaning feels like suffering. Effort with meaning feels like sacrifice. Sacrifice carries dignity. When you know that your discipline is serving something greater than comfort, growth, service, integrity, or contribution, the brain interprets struggle differently. Pain becomes temporary, but purpose remains. Discipline aligned with purpose also protects you from burnout. Burnout often occurs not from working too hard, but from working without meaning. When effort feels disconnect, from values, energy drains quickly. Purpose replenishes energy by reminding you why consistency matters. Even rest becomes intentional, not escapism. You are no longer running away from exhaustion. You are restoring yourself for what matters. This alignment also sharpens decision-making. When discipline is guided by purpose, priorities become clearer. You begin to say no to distractions not out of fear, but out of clarity. Time is no longer wasted on what looks appealing, but leads nowhere. Discipline becomes selective rather than rigid. You conserve energy for what truly moves the needle in your life. There is a moral dimension to disciplined purpose. When effort is aligned with values, character is formed. You begin to trust yourself. Each act of discipline reinforces self-respect. Over time, this self-trust compounds into confidence. Not arrogance, but quiet confidence rooted in consistency. You know who you are because your actions reflect it daily. Purpose also reframes failure. When discipline is disconnected from meaning, setbacks feel personal and defeating. When discipline serves purpose, failure becomes feedback. You adjust, refine, and continue. Purpose keeps you from quitting prematurely because the goal is bigger than a single outcome. Discipline ensures you stay in the process long enough for growth to occur. Lasting transformation is never accidental. It is the result of repeated, purposeful choices. Discipline provides structure. Purpose provides direct on. Together, they create momentum that does not depend on circumstances. When what you do daily is aligned with why you do it, change stops being temporary and becomes who you are. Values are the invisible framework that holds a life together. When control is rooted in values, it stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like alignment. Many people resist control because they associate it with limitation, pressure, or loss of freedom. But control disconnected from values feels oppressive, while control guided by values creates coherence. Life begins to feel meaningful, not because it becomes easier, but because it becomes clearer. Without values, control lacks direction. You may discipline yourself, regulate emotions, or manage habits, yet still feel empty or restless. That emptiness comes from effort without meaning. Values give control a moral and emotional anchor. They answer the question of why certain choices matter. When your actions reflect your values, even difficult decisions feel purposeful rather than burdensome. Values also simplify complexity. Life presents endless options, opinions, and distractions. Without a value-based framework, decision-making becomes exhausting. You overthink, seek external approval, and constantly second-guess yourself. When control is guided by values, many decisions make themselves. You no longer ask what is easiest or most popular, but what is aligned. This clarity reduces inner conflict and brings a sense of peace. A psychological safety that comes from living according to values. When your behavior matches your beliefs, the mind relaxes. Cognitive dissonance, tension created when actions and values conflict, disappears. Many forms of anxiety are not caused by external pressure, but by internal inconsistency. When control is value-centered, integrity is preserved, and with integrity comes inner stability. Values-based control also strengthens resilience. When circumstances change or challenges arise, values remain constant. They act as an internal reference point when external certainty disappears. In moments of loss, rejection, or uncertainty, values remind you who you are beyond the situation. This prevents identity from being hijacked by temporary outcomes. You may feel pain, but you do not lose direction. Control rooted in values also transforms relationships. When boundaries are guided by values, they are firm yet compassionate. You do not control others, but you control how you show up. You speak with honesty without cruelty. You listen without losing yourself, and you choose consistency over convenience. Relationships built on this foundation feel safer and more authentic. There is also a deeper, almost spiritual dimension to value-driven control. When actions align with higher principles such as truth, service, humility, and responsibility, life gains depth. Daily choices become expressions of devotion rather than obligation. Control becomes stewardship, caring for your time, energy, and influence with intention. Even ordinary moments take on significance when they reflect what you stand for. Values protect you from drifting. Without them, life becomes reactive. You chase what feels good, avoid what feels uncomfortable, and slowly lose connection with purpose. With values, discomfort is no longer a signal to stop, but a signal to discern. You learn the difference between pain that damages and pain that refines. Control rooted in values helps you endure what is necessary without becoming hardened. Meaning is not found in constant happiness, but in alignment. When your inner world and outer actions reflect the same principles, life feels integrated. You wake up with fewer regrets and more intention. Control no longer feels like effort against yourself, but cooperation with who you are becoming. As we bring this message to a close, remember this: transformation does not begin with controlling the world, changing people, or forcing outcomes. It begins the moment you decide to take responsibility for what is within your reach. When you learn to guide your thoughts, you choose your direction. When you guard your words, you shape your identity and are. Relationships. When you regulate your emotions, you reclaim your power. When you discipline your habits, you build a future that no longer depends on motivation, but on alignment. Self-control is not about becoming rigid or perfect. It is about becoming intentional. It is about living with clarity instead of chaos, with purpose instead of impulse. When discipline is rooted in meaning and guided by values, life begins to make sense. You stop reacting to every noise around you and start listening to the quiet wisdom within you. That is where peace is found. That is where confidence grows. That is where transformation becomes sustainable. You may not change everything today, and you don't need to. Real change happens when small, conscious choices are repeated with faith and consistency. Over time, those choices shape character, direction, and destiny. When control is guided by values, your life stops feeling scattered and starts feeling meaningful. You begin to live in alignment with who you are meant to become. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your openness to this message.